What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, where we talk all things Marvel and MCU. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and we have our first initial reviews of Moon Knight in. A select handful of big media companies out there were chosen to receive an early screening of the film. I say this because normal press, including myself, gets to see it tomorrow, so I'll be sure to do a video letting you know what I personally think, but some got to see it pretty dang early, and we have their initial reactions here that I'm going to go over, and it sounds like we're in for a pretty big treat with Moon Knight. It sounds like it's going to be very different than anything that we've really seen before in the MCU. And for those of you who were really hoping for that darker side of the MCU with Moon Knight, it sounds like we are indeed going to be getting it. So let's jump into these reviews and see what people are saying. And of course, if you love Marvel and the MCU, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest MCU videos. This first one is coming from Sab Astley over at Collider, and they say, Moon Knight is a brilliantly bonkers, dark globe-trotting adventure. That's already off to a pretty great start, but they continue to say, this is Marvel's trippy national treasure. Oscar Isaac is the best addition to the MCU since Robert Downey Jr., entwining torment and humor into a morally ambiguous cipher. Mark Spector is a whole new caliber of hero. Now, this is a pretty dang good review and initial reaction to compare somebody to Robert Downey Jr., the father of it all, Iron Man, who started it all. That's pretty big. Now, I love Oscar Isaac. I don't doubt that he's going to smash it out of the park, but that is still a pretty big praise right there. But Collider isn't the only people who were impressed. Ashanti Umkar over at BBC states, Moon Knight is dazzling. Oscar Isaac is a revelation. Put on your Disney Plus UK watch list for 30th of March 2022. Relish the music of Hasham Nazum and see May Kalamwe bringing her effortless flair to the screen. So some more big praise for Oscar Isaac. They specifically say he is a revelation and that Moon Knight is dazzling. So far, these reviews definitely caught my attention, but this next one isn't so over the top like these others. This is from Emily Murray from Zavvi, and she says, delivering lots of Indiana Jones style archaeology action. Just swap out the whip for a cape, and Oscar Isaac's great turn in the lead role. Moon Knight is plenty of fun. It's not as bonkers as I hoped for, but a later episode hints much more of that is coming. Now, I believe, and I should have stated this in the beginning, that these critics have seen the first 4 episodes of Moon Knight. That's a lot of episodes. I don't know how many I'll personally get, I just know I get them tomorrow, but they've seen a good amount of this series now. And even though this review says it's not as bonkers as she hoped for, that still doesn't mean that it wasn't really good. She still praised Oscar Isaac for the lead role, and even compared it to Indiana Jones, which of course is a win. However, a lot of the other reviews are really good. Let's go over to Tom Power from Tech Radar, and he had a lot to say here. He says, it's unlike anything you've seen from Marvel before. I'd go as far as to say, and I don't say this lightly, it's the best MCU TV show ever. Moon Knight is the beneficiary of being completely untethered from every other MCU project. Without those connections weighing, if that's the right word to use, it down, it has a freedom to do whatever it wants, and oh boy, does it. The opening episode is structured in such a way that, but for the Marvel logo at the start, you wouldn't think it's an MCU TV series. The way it's edited, how its narrative plays out, Isaac's mesmeric, fully present performance honestly is top tier TV. I'll save the rest for my review. There are a couple of tiny little things there about it, just to put that out there, but Moon Knight is worth the wait. Again, a great review about Moon Knight with really high praise to the series. Now, this one I really like because it talks about how different Moon Knight is from all of the other MCU projects. I've heard a lot of people and seen a lot of comments in the comment section talking about how Marvel is releasing so much stuff right now. And while some fans, like myself, may absolutely just love that and watch everything that comes out, some might have to pick and choose what they watch. And it sounds like Moon Knight is just going to be completely different than anything we've seen before. So I suggest everybody watching this. Now, some of these critics have actually mentioned how weird and actually said the word horror in their review, which I know a lot of people are going to like. Tom Percival from BBC Radio says, had a lot of fun with Moon Knight. It started weird and only seems to be getting weirder. A good blend of horror, action and humor. Plus, he has a great cape. It's interesting that he uses the words weird, horror, action, and humor in the same paragraph. But that's actually kind of something that I wanted from Moon Knight. It's kind of a psychological thriller, which I'm actually really excited for. But the fact that it still has some humor into it is obviously really good as well. The University Film Review says, Moon Knight is fantastic and Oscar Isaac is exceptional as the tormented Mark Spector. This is the Marvel show everyone is going to be talking about. Completely bonkers that leads with a haunting adventure. Marvel Studios has knocked it out of the park with its best show yet. So a few people have called it bonkers and weird, and now a couple of reviews have said that it's Marvel's best show yet. Now, right now as it stands, Loki is my favorite show, followed closely by WandaVision. But based off of these reviews, I am wondering if it's going to stay that way, if my top two are going to stay that way after seeing Moon Knight. Let's go over to David Opie from Digital Spy. He says, I've watched the first 4 Moon Knight episodes and I'm as divided by the show as Mark Spector himself. When it works, it's a wildly original MCU entry with flashes of greatness, but some of the sillier aspects detract from the horror. Die-hard comic fans might not enjoy it as much as newcomers. And honestly, that is something that I think every MCU film or show has had to deal with, because they obviously don't just copy the comics. Heck, in the Ms. Marvel trailer yesterday, they completely changed up her powers, and that could piss some people off. Instead of her being exposed to the Terrigen Mist, she gets a bracelet that seemingly gives her powers. That is completely different than the comics. But if everything went exactly how it went in the comics, we would already know what would happen, and we'd already know what to expect. Now, this review does mention the horror aspect as well. However, he says that there are sillier sides that do detract from that horror aspect. Now, keep in mind, it's kind of like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Yes, it's supposed to be the first horror film in the MCU, but it is still PG-13 and it is still a Marvel/Disney movie. The same goes for Moon Knight. Sounds like it's going to be weird, going to be trippy, have a horror aspect to it, but it's still going to be a Marvel Studios project on Disney+. So don't expect it to be like some rated R horror film. The last review we'll go over here is from David C. James over at Games Freezer, and he says, Moon Knight is a very weird show with no obvious connections to the rest of the MCU, but is all the better for it. Oscar Isaac rivaling Tom Hardy for best regular guy, taunted by deep voice monster that lives in his head performance. Another big comparison there, comparing Oscar Isaac's performance to Tom Hardy's as Venom. And again, we get a mention of how weird it is and how it doesn't have really any connections to the MCU. Now, of course, I do ultimately think that they're going to connect Moon Knight to the MCU by the end of it. I actually do think Moon Knight is going to go on to become an Avenger. But it does seem like this is kind of not necessarily an experiment, but essentially an experiment. They're taking it a very different direction than anything they've ever done before, but I say it's not an experiment because Kevin Feige does everything pretty perfectly. So this could be the future of where Marvel Studios is going, doing one-off projects that don't necessarily focus on that MCU connection, but of course are connected to the MCU. So these reviews seem to be pretty dang good. What do you think about them? Are you excited for Moon Knight? And of course, once I watch all of the episodes that I get tomorrow, I'll be sure to give you my initial thoughts as well. And I'm also going to the premiere on Tuesday, so I'll probably vlog that as well. But in the meantime, what do you think of these reactions? Are you excited for Moon Knight? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want more Marvel videos. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.